It's a staggering fact that unproductive meetings are costing the United States a colossal $37 billion annually. So if your week was cluttered with less than stellar meetings, you're certainly not alone. In today's episode of Water Cooler Wisdom, we delve into the true costs of bad meetings beyond just the bottom line. We'll discern what crosses the threshold of meeting worthy versus sending an email. We'll discuss what it means to over-collaborate. And of course, we're going to equip you with the tips to enhance the value of your meetings. So tune in before your next meeting to discover how you can help buck the trend and make every meeting meaningful.
Hi, welcome to Water Cooler Wisdom. I'm one of your hosts, Rachel Grail.
And I am Jake Blocker.
I'm so happy to have this meeting with you today, Jake, because we are talking about meetings today.
Yes, I love meetings. Yes, this is going to be a great meeting.
I didn't even mean to say that, but just came out. I've had too many meetings today, so my brain is frazzled.
Yes, that happens.
How do you feel about meetings in general?
You know what? The good and bad. Sometimes I look forward to it, especially since we work fully remote. So there's like I get to talk to another human being today, versus my cat. So it's right. Sometimes nice to have that, but then there's other times where you're like, oh, I'm dreading this meeting so much. I'm not ready for this. I'm tired. My brain is fried. What about you?
Yeah, I feel similarly. I generally love collaborating with people, and I am eager to connect with people, but then sometimes I have high hopes, and my hopes are occasionally dashed when we get into the meeting. But I think that we've got a great guest to talk about this today. As you know, Michael Reedy is very well informed on this subject, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say today.
He can read a phone book, and it's interesting to me. So it's great. It'll be a great conversation.
It will.
Before we get to the conversation, I have, for everyone listening, we have a new bit that we're adding to the end of every episode for each guest. And so it's going to be just a rapid fire question. And we'll start this with Michael today. But to really test it out, see how it goes, and to get to know each of us better, I thought we could do it on ourselves. Is that okay with you, Rachel?
I love that. I think if we're asking our guests to do it, we should also share openly.
Might as well.
And honestly.
Yeah. All right. So I'll ask the questions. We'll both answer. You can start, and I'll do the second response.
Sounds good.
First up, coffee or tea in the morning?
Tea. PG Tips.
Coffee, and 15 cups of it. What about early bird or night owl work style?
Mostly early bird. I can get down with the night owl, but mostly early bird.
I'm a wannabe
siesta though, all day.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm a wannabe early bird, but realistically, I'm a night owl. Unfortunately.
Know thyself, Jake.
Yes. What about digital or handwritten for your to-do list?
For work stuff, I do digital, but I do handwritten. Actually, I have a little thing called The Remarkable. It's like a digital notepad.
I have that too. Yeah.
So blending all worlds.
Yeah, mine's sitting collecting dust somewhere because I don't use it anymore. But it's expensive. I
just revived it in the
holder.
New Year's. Like, okay, let's write some New Year's resolutions in here.
Yes. For me, it's mostly digital, but I like, sometimes I'll do a quick handwrite that'll transfer to digital someday.
Mm-hmm. Nothing like a good pen for some things.
Oh, for sure. What about an app, platform, software, whatever it is that you swear by with work?
I think I've been using ChatGPT for a lot of little stuff lately, and it's just been really fun. It's opened up things. So lately, that's what I swear by. I
agree. A lot of productivity. Yeah, I do the same thing.
Gotta watch it though.
Oh yeah. Don't get too comfortable with it. So I think for me in marketing, it's HubSpot, and HubSpot does not sponsor this, but HubSpot, if you would like to sponsor this, by all means, they are awesome. And they should pay me for how much I recommend them. What about a book that has made a significant impact on you?
God, there's so many. I had a hard time deciding, but I'll just say The Untethered Soul.
Yeah, for me, probably Twilight. No, just kidding. It's not.
Oh,
I'm just kidding. It is not.
I was
100%
gonna
not.
be
No, it is not a promise. So for
That's
me,
no shade for any Twilight lovers out there. That's
only a
perfectly
little, but
respectable.
no. I mean, I still read it, so yeah. No, for me, it's hard. I read primarily fiction. I'm not the biggest fan of the coaching or self-help stuff. I just tend to think of all the things I'm doing wrong whenever I read those books and just get stuck there. So I don't know that I can actually answer it. I mean, I've read some really good books in the last year.
What book would you recommend, the novel that you would recommend I read?
Ooh, Song of Achilles is a really good book.
I've heard that's a good book.
Yeah. It took me a while to get into it, but then once I did, it's like, it's a solid book.
Writing it down.
Yes. I don't recommend The Fourth Wing. I finished my year on that one and people loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry. I might get hate for that, but
right. We're going to lose some listeners today.
Oh man. What about, speaking of podcasts or music for background as you work?
Honestly, most of the work that I do is so thinking heavy that I need to work in silence. It's a treat if I can put on some music. I do love that. Podcasts are more for like if I'm driving or walking. Love that.
Yep. I agree. Similar, like whenever I'm doing any writing or reading for work, I'll do lo-fi a lot, and I have some lo-fi playlists that there's no music. I just have something in the background.
Yeah.
Or
if I'm doing lo-fi.
Oh yes, I love it. I do some classical lo-fi, which is very interesting.
Nice. Maybe we can link some to the podcast so people can know what on earth we're talking about for those that are uninitiated.
But if I'm doing like some monotonous work where I don't have to think too much, it's just, pushing things out, then a podcast or a good playlist is up my alley.
Love it.
What about work environment, remote or in person?
Day-to-day remote. I do love being in person with people and doing trainings and having meetings together, but for day-to-day remote.
Yeah.
And I know where you fall on this one.
Yeah. If you just listen to episode 1 and you'll know exactly where I stand, but remote 150 billion%.
Introverts unite from our separate workspaces.
Yes, please. But I will say I like the occasional get together with teams and seeing people in person, but 99% of the time remote.
Agreed.
All right. Final and biggest question is, if you could have a water cooler chat with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Obviously, this is a hard question, but actually I chose this really quickly. It would be RuPaul. And the reason is because I am so inspired by the way RuPaul does incredibly meaningful work in the world, sets up a platform that launches other people, advocates for people, and does it all with such a sense of play and delight and confidence. I'm endlessly inspired. What about you, Jake?
It was actually the same as RuPaul because
that's so funny.
Yeah, I mean, we knew this because we were
talking about RuPaul. We fan out
Drag Race before this. Yeah, so it's absolutely RuPaul for all the same reasons. I've been rewatching episodes, and I kind of like this a little bit better since I know what's happening, know the end results. I just kind of focus more on the dialogue and those little moments he has with each queen of just like talking them up and little bits of wisdom that come from RuPaul. And I love his bits about like not caring about what anyone has to say or think about you. Like, I can't control what they do, so why do I care about it? And it's,
if they don't pay your bills, you don't pay them no mind.
Exactly.
He's sowing seeds of love and confidence in a community that so deserves and needs that. Just love it.
I completely agree. And the closing line, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else?
Can you say that on the podcast?
I think so. I think hell's okay.
Okay. Well then, amen.
Amen. Yes.
Amen.
Awesome. Well, that was great.
Should I bring our esteemed guest on for the day?
Yes, please tell the listeners about who this amazing man is.
Oh, listeners, you are in for a treat.
Michael, a dedicated facilitator at Interaction Associates since 1997, specializes in custom learning processes. He previously led the Dublin Institute of Adult Education, overseeing 120 trainers and developing new programs. A published author, his works include Principal and Profit Corporate Responsibility in Ireland and Watch Your Language, Words Really Matter. His extensive client experience spans several industries, with notable engagements at Alkermes, Apt Associates, Biogen, Dell, GE Capital, and Nokia, among many others. Michael holds degrees from Harvard University, the University of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome, and the National University of Ireland, underscoring his lifelong commitment to education and human development. Welcome, Michael. We're so pleased to have you.
Delighted to be here, Rachel and Jake. I'm delighted to be with you.
Yes, thank you, Michael. So we'll kick us off here for our amazing topic here. So today we're talking about what I think is probably everyone's favorite part of work. It's meetings, right? Everyone loves meetings. That's what I hear? Or maybe I'm alone, but meetings, we're going to talk about that. And I know we've all sat through meetings and wondered, why am I here? How did this get so off track? Or the usual, this could have been an email. So we're going to talk about that, dive into some issues that we all face in meetings. Now, unfortunately, we only have 25 minutes, so we can't solve the world problems in meetings, but we're going to do our best. So, also insert Interaction Associates programs for improving your meetings here.
Well, honestly, if there was one person in the world I would trust to solve all of my problems, it would probably be the great Michael Reedy.
Yes. Completely agree. So I'm going to start this off with more of a big picture, Michael. So we all know that poorly run meetings can literally cost companies a lot of money in their bottom line. But what else is at stake with poorly run meetings?
It's a great question. I think the person who is inviting us into meetings, whether they be our manager, the leader, the project leader, a peer, I think is always looking to generate conversation, looking to generate dialogue, which is, I suppose, in the strict sense of the word, it is two or more people coming together to enlarge the meaning. And so I think one of the bigger things is that you might lose track of the meaning and of people's ability to feel, I'm part of the meaning making in this organization. I'm part of the solution making. I'm part of the vision making. I'm part of the co-creation. And so it seems to me there's a really big invitation to engagement that gets lost if meetings are poorly run. People wonder, is my time so undervalued that they bring me to this? I do think there's almost a belief also that I am essential to this conversation. I am needed. And if it's poorly run, there's a little bit of a decrease in trust, it seems to me, over time. Clearly not in any one meeting, but generally speaking, I think we don't get invited to one meeting. It's like one meeting leads to another, leads to another. We look at meetings in our own system as saying there's always an opening, there's a narrowing, and there's a closing going on. And so, like, being clear, what piece are we focused on here? Are we opening this problem conversation? Are we narrowing it? Are we closing it? Are we opening the solution? Or are we narrowing the solution? Or is this the moment where we get to actually say we're going to implement this solution? And so maybe I'd say there's also a hope always in every meeting that this is a good use of this group of folk and their time. I often say to people, I think the most important thing that people have is two things. They have talent and they have time. And they're giving away their talent to the company that they work with for, and they're also giving away the second most important thing, which is their time. And as far as we know, our time is on this earth is limited. And so it's really important, I think, that people understand my time and my talent is being utilized in a trustful way by the group, by the team, by the leader, by the manager. And then, of course, I think if we forget that there is always a process, sometimes I think we get waylaid by the content of our meeting. We want the content, of course, and we want to get it done. But we do well to realize there is no such thing as only having content. There is always a way of getting to that content. And therefore, there's always a process.
I love so many of those points that you brought up, Michael. I think this idea of the content and the process is something that comes up so often. And also this piece about hope. I love what you said. There's always a hope that this will be a good use of time. And so both of those points, I think, really connect to this next question that I have for you, which also speaks to what Jake mentioned. We hear this phrase, this could have been an email. And maybe we've likely said it. I think I may have said it in my own mind, even just today. So could you speak a little bit about what crosses the threshold of meeting worthy versus just send an email, get the content out maybe?
In the work we do, we sometimes run a meeting and we ask, what's the problems with meetings at? And you mentioned a number of companies that I have had the privilege of helping. I sometimes think we are, at the moment, I'm infatuated by the idea of habit. That is to say, maybe it's a New Year thing. I'm thinking particularly in terms of micro habits. What are some of the micro habits I might adopt in a meeting context? But I think the downside is we sometimes have bad habits and we sometimes have habits that enslave us, for want of a better word, a bit strong maybe, but that where we have lost our way and it's the Friday meeting or it's the Monday meeting or we have to have this finance meeting, we have to have this marketing meeting. And in some ways, if a meeting loses if it becomes ordinary, it doesn't mean that I believe there is a place for a regularity of a team meeting. And at the same time, someone has to make it not just rote. Someone has to put effort into the preparation. And it's quite an extraordinary thing. And that I stumbled on this when I first came to Interaction Associates in 1997. I had been leading meetings in Dublin, Ireland for at least 10 years. And I was stunned in the first course I ever took. It was a 2-day mastering meetings, 2 days on mastering meetings in person with a guy called Jack Regan. And he was a great teacher with a fellow called John Reed. And they taught a thing called desired outcomes. And they said every meeting should end up starting out with, what do you want to get out of this? And it should be able to answer that question. So I do feel that a meeting that does not have a desired outcome is not meeting a threshold of worthiness, by which now a desired outcome can be a product or it can be a knowledge, we say. So I do hate the word just. This is just an information meeting. This is just, I have to advise the word just in this context is misused and abused. This is an information sharing meeting, is a profound meeting because you're getting to hear different perspectives on the same truth, perhaps, or the same reality as experienced by different folk, even within the same department, the same division, the same organization. There's a piece of me that almost feels if a meeting could say up front, what's the desired outcome? almost everything else is going to work. I discovered fairly recently, since Zoom came along, you can put the desired outcome in the Zoom invitation. And it's like, oh my goodness, you could prepare for the meeting and have everyone understand this is what we're meeting for. We're meeting to achieve, maybe it's a decision to achieve an agreement. Maybe we're meeting to have a shared understanding of what's the problem so that we could move forward into the solution. Have a shared awareness of people's perception of what might be a solution to a problem so that we can begin to choose which solution will we run with and move forward into implementation. Now, of course, nearly everybody goes to a meeting not with just wanting to get a desired outcome, but they also, I think, deep down hope, pray, believe that we might make a decision in this meeting. And it's so much, it's the fuel. It's a human fuel. It's a human fuel, I think, that nearly everyone wants to. I heard recently of someone who, it was actually a person that I had met in Rome many years ago, and somebody went to them and they said, don't wait to tomorrow to begin. Don't wait to tomorrow to decide. Decide today. And so pulling forward that decision making, if the information has been uncovered, is a significant hope, I think, that makes for making a meeting worthy. If we could get to the point where we feel that I have been asked for my opinion and others, significant stakeholders, have been also invited to share their opinion, I think there is then, if we could agree on how will we make decisions and say it out loud. Not every decision has to go for consensus. Sometimes people are really happy. I remember being on the board of my own company, and this is Interaction Associates, when it was an ESOP, and the chair of the board, Mary Beth Tahar, would say, and in a one-on-one conversation with me, what do you want on the board meeting, the quarterly board meeting, Michael? And I would say, and then she'd say, there's 5 other people on the board, Michael. You're the second person I've gone to. I'm going to go to the other 4, and then I'll make the decision as to what will get on the agenda for the meeting, which she was usually doing this work 3 weeks ahead of time. Again, getting stakeholder inclusion, letting me know how she was going to make the decision. And ultimately, I was very happy that she would make the decision as to what would get on the agenda once I knew that my input had been sought, had been weighed, and was valued.
I like that piece on involvement specifically because I feel like there's always 2 extremes for most meetings. It's either not enough people are involved and no one knows what's going on. You get the transparency issues, all of that, or everyone is involved and nothing ever gets done because everyone has to have an opinion and no one is going to come to a consensus on that when there's too many people. So I want to ask you about that balance. So how can leaders strike the balance between seeking valuable input and overburdening team members with excessive collaboration or maybe too much collaboration?
I think it's too much. I think that's fascinating to raise that reality because I used to think that every decision had to be made by consensus. Mm-hmm. I somehow thought that was correct. I thought that was right. I've subsequently changed my mind on that. And so I think you're raising the possibility of too much collaboration is another way of saying perhaps we were going for consensus in everything. Mm-hmm. So I do feel consensus properly defined is everyone feels heard, everyone feels invited in, and it's that everyone is clear then what's going to happen to my input. So sometimes we actually say you're trying to balance involvement and ownership. Clearly, you want to walk out of that meeting with everyone owning the decision. Sometimes the greatest possibility of ownership is when someone, after a long period of indecisiveness, says, this is what we're doing. They don't decide on their own. There's been quite a lot of input beforehand, but they grasp the decisive nettle or the decision-making nettle. I do think gathering input from individuals can happen in one meeting, and then maybe we come back together and someone says, I've reflected on that. We've made this is the decision going forward. Another alternative, of course, is that you gather together in the group and everyone does go for consensus. I think little parameters have to be built in there. How long will we spend doing this? In my experience, it's a fantastic little invitation to say, we'll go for consensus. Let's go for consensus and spend an hour hopefully getting there, or a day, or a month, or a quarter, but whatever is appropriate. But in the event of us not reaching consensus, we will have a fallback decision-making methodology. And the fallback could be to a subgroup would make the decision, an individual would make the decision, or we'll delegate that decision. Nearly every one of us in leadership, you, Jake, and you, Rachel, and of course, all of our listeners, are delegated with constraints to be decision makers. I'm lucky to have been invited into leadership as a leading learner. And so when I show up to do some work with an organization, I am delegated to be the leader of the learning under the umbrella of facilitation sometimes, under the umbrella of leadership, under the umbrella of coaching, under the umbrella of management. But I'm actually not totally free to do whatever I darn well like. I'm delegated with some constraints to do that. So nearly every leader in the world, with the exception of an autocrat, is delegated with constraints. Even the president of the United States, great and all as our country is delegated with constraints. 4 years. After 4 years, go back and ask permission. The most you can possibly do it for is 8 years. So anyway, I'm really just saying that getting clear on the decision making and saying it out loud is a really significant, I think, engagement tool. And then people know we're going to make a decision.
And I remember learning about that and having that feeling of, we are going to make a decision. We do have this time box. I have an awareness of how this process is going to go. And it's my experience with that is that it's made my brain feel like it can relax. I can be calm. I understand what the order is going to be. And then I can just give myself to being a good participant in the meeting. So what I'm hearing is that there's so much that can be solved just by knowing how you're going to set it up, having a plan, having a desired outcome, and then communicating that plan to everyone so that we can all show up at our best in some way.
Yes, yeah.
And I think this connects to this other question that I have for you. We talked a little bit about ownership in a different context of owning the implementation of something, but there's also the ownership in terms of defining roles in a meeting. So in your experience, how does clearly defining roles like a facilitator versus a leader impact the effectiveness of a meeting?
I think, Rachel, that's a profound question, really. And I think that if I was asked to say, what is the one stumbling block that most leaders fail on in terms of managing the process, it is not being clear on the distribution of roles within their meeting. And clearly, we think there are at least 5 significant roles in any properly run meeting. We've actually discovered a new one in the virtual world of the Zoom land. But we would say there's the most important role in any meeting is, and this is like OMG moment, is participant. The most important, in other words, if you can't generate participation, you should really consider sending out the email, as Jake said earlier. If you can't generate engagement, if you can't make it owned by the participants, then really genuinely consider the email. Now, the second, we say there's three other major roles. One is the leader. We say the leader is responsible for ultimately managing the decision process. That's a content. By contrast, how we get to that decision or share that information is a process. And so in a very, very well-run meeting and in a complex meeting, we suggest that the role of leader would be different than the role of facilitator. That is to say, if the leader is more than, and this sounds really, it's hard to get, more than 30% invested in the outcome, they should consider having someone other than they be responsible for the process.
Makes so much sense.
Now, it's a skilled role. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, of course, we think we should have a timekeeper, perhaps, and that it would be really good for the leader and the facilitator to share responsibility for time with the participants.
Yes.
And we do think it's pretty important to be recording what people are saying. And that's another way that people's input seems to gain value by being either physically recorded or manually recorded, digitally recorded or manually recorded. In the digital age, we've discovered that in a complex meeting, you might consider having a producer as a fifth role. Mm-hmm. And again, most meetings are one-on-one. That is to say, I'm meeting with the two of you this moment, and so we don't need to overcomplicate that. We decide to distribute the functions, the four functions of any meeting, which are content function, process function, decision-making function, and participation between the two people in the meeting. But as you gain or grow in complexity, you'd probably want to consider pulling apart the leader from the facilitator and having someone be responsible for the facilitation side of things. Mm-hmm. And somebody be responsible for the scribing or the recording, and somebody also being responsible for the timekeeping.
As a timekeeper here, I'm usually that is my worst role, and I dread it so much. But fortunately, there's a clock here that I can actually see the time. But anyway, I'll timekeep this and say we're close to the end here. And Michael, first, Rachel, anything else you wanted to? I feel like I interrupted you. We have a little time.
No, I just think that every time you speak, Michael, it's magic. And I guess I'm gonna throw one last question on you. If I could just in one line, mm-hmm. What do you think is the magic of meetings?
For me, the magic is that I can feel my input is wanted. Mm. I can understand others' input, and I can taste the sense of collective wisdom being generated when real curiosity and real creativity is allowed to flourish in a small group of 4 to 24. And sometimes those moments are truly magical when you can feel your mind and your heart being enlarged. You can feel your thinking being softened, your hardness of heart being softened, and your heart being enlarged at the same time, and your mind being stretched. And so that is a uniquely human thing, I think, that we bring people together and something extraordinary happens for them in terms of their own understanding of themselves, their larger understanding of the context in which they're working or playing or cohabiting. And out of that comes an enlarged vision of what their lives might be like going forward, that they're prepared to commit to and implement.
Well, that sounds worth it to me. Thank you. Thank you, Jake, for letting me throw that in. I know you've got some more questions too. So
yes, I'm very excited, Michael, for you to be our first person to go through our rapid fire questions. And
Okay.
so are you ready for some quick one-liner questions here?
I'm ready.
All right.
Yes.
Here we go.
I am.
All right. Coffee or tea in the morning?
Oh, I'm a tea man. Total tea.
Yes. I assumed, yeah.
Irish tea.
Yes. Early bird or night owl work style?
Night owl.
Oh, interesting.
Work style.
Digital or handwritten for your to-do list?
Handwritten. I'll say that very quietly. But handwritten, yes.
There is no shame in that.
No, none at all. So is there an app or platform, software, anything like that you swear by in your work? Or is it your handwritten notes?
I love the audio function where I can send myself an email and compose what I'm going to write by using the audio function and sending myself that I can then edit.
Oh, love it. Yeah. What about a book that has made a significant impact on you? If you have to narrow it down.
Well, this is going to be a hard one.
I would say, I think Leadership Without Easy Answers and Leadership on the Line by a fellow called Heifetz had a significant impact. Ron Heifetz was a professor at the Kennedy School of Government, and I think they had a profound impact on me. Those books.
What about podcast or music for background while you work, or maybe there's something else? I
love traditional Irish music, and so, but as long as there doesn't have to be singing in there, I'd have the Chieftains on in the background, or some later addition to the Chieftains perception.
Love that. What about work environment, remote or in person?
I've come to understand remote is nice, but and it's great to be in your pajamas sometimes. But I think for productivity, I like the environment because I like meeting some folk. Makes
sense. Final question, big one here.
This is $1 million question.
This is the $1 million question for sure. Yes, if you could have a water cooler chat with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I would love to have a conversation with Rosa Parks and see the power that must have been in that lady to take literally the seat she took and ask her what happened the first time she did that, or because they came back to have another go at it, is my reading of it. And she was a quiet but brilliant leader. And I'd love to meet her.
I love that. You're going to be a hard one to follow. So good luck to our next guest.
I'm delighted to be here with you, and thank you for inviting me.
Yes.
I really appreciate it.
It's been such a treat to have you along, Michael. I learn something from you every time I hear you speak.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Michael, so much. And I look forward to having you on again. And so with that, I'll close it out. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening to Water Cooler Wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by Interaction Associates, a leading professional development and leadership training organization whose mission is to help people work better together. If you'd like to learn more, visit interactionassociates.com. If you have questions, comments, or are interested in collaborating with this podcast, you can email us at watercoolerwisdom@interactionassociates.com.